Hey guys, we're back. We're back with part number, I would think this is like 4, right? Of our mini project, which is the scope. So, oh, sorry. So today we're gonna be working with the UVs and the bakes, okay? We're gonna take a look at that and let me show you the final retopology. So this is the thumbnail from yesterday's video. Let me bring this back to the origin, and there we go. As you can see, this is the skull, the final like mirror skull that we have. And I did what I mentioned on the last video with the what's the word, with the teeth, sorry. So they're not super sharp. They have like this sort of like flat edge to the bottom part. Everything has been smoothed. You can see that hard lines over there. And again, we're only at, if I take a look at the topology, 2600. So that's perfect. We're in a really good spot in regards to the amount of topology. We definitely needed more topology down here for the teeth than what we need, for instance, like on the back part of the head. But it's looking quite nice. So let's do UVs. And UVs, I'm gonna use the traditional method that I've been using for the past 8 years or so. So I'm just gonna go UV, camera base to create a first like imprint of the UVs. You can see the UV editor right here. And then I'm gonna go into UV, 3D cut and sew UV tool, and we're gonna start doing some cuts. So I know that the eyes are gonna be cut out, so we'll just cut them out like that. Super simple. This hole over here, we're also gonna cut it out. This is why edge loops are so helpful whenever you're retopologizing, because it's a lot easier to go through the edge loop and cut them where they're supposed to be cut, right? Usually, oh, that's a bad point right there. No, not the end of the world. Just grab those two guys and merge to center. Grab those two edges, and I'm gonna say UV and sew UV edges. There we go. So normally we would like to have like the bottom part of the whole thing separated. So I'm gonna go with a UV, 3D cut, and I'm gonna use this line right here, which is like a hidden line, right? And then I'm gonna bring this line down, and let's get it on the inside of the teeth. And then we're gonna follow again, kind of like the inside line here on the teeth. And this is so that everything smooths out a little bit better. We will always have cuts in our UV maps. It's part of the disadvantages with working with UV maps. But here's again where we want to have or be as clean as possible whenever we're doing these sort of things, so that the deformation and the distortion of the textures is not as bad. There we go. Now, I don't want to do this twice, so one thing I can do here is I can just say mesh and mirror again. Or let's go to the mirror options, and this is going to be world x negative. There we go. And we should have this. So now, as you can see, all of the lines that we did there for the teeth are perfectly fine. The only problem, of course, is that we have a middle section now. So, of course, let's grab the middle section, which, as you can see, goes all the way through. UV, and we're going to say sew UV edges to close it again. So now it's just a matter of finishing this thing right here. And again, I think it might be a good idea to continue through this section right here. So just right there, connect with that element right there. Oop. And then like this. That one right there, and that one right there. There we go. So now this like bottom part is going to be separated from the rest of the element. And for like heads in general, there's a couple of ways. Some people like to do like segments. Some people like to do like the luchador method, I call it, which is like a seam line going down the back and towards the front. I think we're gonna go for that one. So I'm gonna start like here. We're gonna go pretty much all the way over, and then I'm just gonna delete this line that we have here going in the center, because we want to keep the face as clean as possible. So there's gonna be like, that's gonna be like the luchador. I call it the luchador effect because we have this seam that goes all the way through here. So let's take a look at how this looks. I'm gonna go here, Control U to unfold, and yeah, that looks good. Control L to lay it out. Let's do Control U, Control L to both of them, or all of them, and Control U, and then Control L, and that's it. So as you can see, that's a very nice and clean UV. And thanks to the method that we're gonna be using with the techniques that I'm gonna show you in just a moment, even though we do have a seam right here, I think we're gonna be good. So yeah, this is it. I mean, we can rotate this around, have it flipped on the other side. It's fine. To be honest, this is gonna work perfectly fine. So I'm just gonna delete the history here and export this object. You can export this as an FBX. You can export this as an OBJ. Both of them work, especially because it's just one object. There's a little bit more of an advanced thing later on, and I'm gonna call this stylized skull low. There we go. So now let's jump into Substance Painter. And yeah, it's just gonna be a nice little trick here. So what I want to show you is again a really simple and nice technique that is gonna give you. It's not gonna be like traditional hand painted, but it's gonna look very, very similar. This one I learned from a student actually. I have a class where I teach them about like exposition and stuff like that. And one of the projects that they have to do is that they have to teach me something. And he taught me this. He taught us, or like all of the group, how to do this process. So let's go to the project. Nexttut live, assets, stylized skull, and it's the low. There we go. Open. Let's do 2K. 2K should be more than enough. Hit OK. There we go. And the first thing we need to do is we need to bake texture. Someone asked me on the last live stream, I think, like, what about bakes and stuff? I think bakes are easy. I'm not sure why some people have some issues with it. The best advice that I can give you guys for bakes is make sure you have clean UPs and make sure you have clean topology. If you have both of those things, then bakes, especially here from like Substance or from Marmoset, are so simple. You just go here to texture set settings, all the way down here, bake mesh maps, select the size at which you want to bake, which in this case 2K should be fine. And we're going to select the high poly, not the retopo, because that one was a little bit too fragmented, the high poly, and hit open. Right now, there's nothing that we need to change, but if we see some issues, we might change a couple of these things. So let me say bake selected textures. And yeah, that's normal map. Looks good. That's the ambient occlusion. Looks good. But see how there's like a couple of holes right there? You can see them on the maps, especially if we go to like the normal map. There we go. If we go to the normal and height, there's a couple of weird areas. That's exactly what I was mentioning. Sometimes you're gonna have to play around with this max frontal distance and max rear distance. So the way normal maps work is you have your low poly surface and then you have your high poly surface. And you're gonna shoot rays from your low poly surface to the front and to the back to try and find where the high surface is. So if the polygon is too far away, it shoots the ray, but the ray does not reach the high poly, then you get like a flat weird area. So in this case, I think the max rear distance, we can increase it a little bit, not too much, just a little bit. And if we bake again, as you can see, we're not seeing holes anymore because it's enough depth for the rays to find the high poly and bring that information into the low poly. So for us, that was the only thing that we needed. Just push that back. And look at this, super nice looking skull without having any sort of issue for the high poly effect. So we're gonna build this again, super simple. I wanna keep this tutorial really easy so that anyone can follow. And we're gonna do a 4-point layer, okay? So we're gonna do a base color, we're gonna do edges, we're gonna do shadows, and then we're gonna do a light on top of it, okay? So four elements. And the first thing is we are gonna do a fill layer, and it's gonna be called base color. And on this fill layer, I'm going to turn off metalness, normal, and height. We only need color and roughness. And the roughness is going to be all the way to the top because I want this to be flat. Actually, like the best way to analyze this would be to analyze it on the just base color channel. But let's say we have a light and we're going to see something. So the base color goes there. We, of course, select the base color that we want to go for, which is going to be roughly about here. Whenever you're picking a base color, I recommend going like in the middle section of your square. So on this area right here, because if your base color is up here, then there's not a lot of difference from your contrast all the way to the top. That's actually something that I do quite a bit with my paints when I'm painting miniatures. You start with like a really dark color, and that way you can build the highlights like nicer and nicer or with more range rather than starting with like a really bright color and then going there. So for instance, if I'm painting a miniature and I want to do like a red color, instead of going with my instinct and starting here, I would start like here. That way I can then add highlights at this level and then highlights at this level and then even highlights at this level, okay? So I have more range because I started all the way down. In contrast, if you were to start here, which is probably the color that you want, you're very limited on the amount of highlights that you can do, that you're not gonna get as much contrast. So yeah, it's just a quick tip. So keep your midtones right about here. So I'm gonna go like there, perfect. So that's my base color. I'm gonna add a new layer, and this is gonna be my shadows. I'm gonna turn everything but color, and I'm gonna sample the same color that I had. I'm gonna make it darker, a little bit more saturated, and here's the kicker. I'm actually gonna change the hue a little bit. Let's go a little bit greenish here. Okay, why? Why are we changing the hue? To give a little bit more visual interest to the whole thing. Otherwise, things are going to look too monochrome. So in this case, we want to have a little bit of variation. Some people like to go really crazy with like a blue or like a purple. I'm going to keep it kind of like on the same tones. So I'm going to go for this sort of like greenish hue. I'm going to right click, black mask, and we're going to do a very traditional generator here. And we're going to do our, what's the word? Our dirt layer, of course. So there we go. We have this effect right here. Now, this doesn't look too different to what we normally do. So how are we going to give it this sort of like hand-painted effect? Here's the trick. There's a nice little filter inside of the filters called blur directional. So I'm going to right-click the mask and I'm going to add a filter. And on this filter, I'm going to go here and I'm going to, sorry, blur slope, this one right here. See what it does? Not only will it blur the colors, it will actually create this sort of like, I don't know, weird geometric soft shapes on the whole thing. So when I do this, we immediately get this very, very nice, like, traditionally like hand paint, like if you were like giving small little taps with your brush, and you get a very, very nice effect. I really, really like how this thing looks. Now you can still use the tricks that we've done before, like if we were to add like a multiply. Remember when we like tried to remove some of the dirt? But in this case, I think I actually like it actually looks quite nice. I might go into like overlay and then just like lower this thing to play around with the intensity and see how we get this very, very cool effect. Now the blur slope has a couple of things. We have the intensity, which is like, as you can see, kind of like the size of like those flakes of the element. So if you want like a really soft effect, you increase the intensity. You can also change the quality, which is gonna give you like this more grainy look. In this case, I like the quality to be set at 1. And yeah, I mean, just playing around with these things, as you can see, will give you a really, really cool and nice effect. You can, of course, add more layers, more elements. You can paint specific areas if you want, but I think this looks quite nice. So that's going to be my main shadow. And here's the good thing. If you were to have a game where there's no light and it's just like a flat color, you would have this. So you're still seeing some depth on this character, which is quite nice. Now let's add let's call this shadows. And now let's add the lights. So I'm going to go 1 here. Again, turn everything off. We only need the color. Resample this guy. Move this up, not all the way up, again, just a little bit up. See how by just moving a little bit up, we already have nice contrast here, and we still have room to add more contrast if we want to. And now I'm also gonna change this. I'm gonna make this a little bit warmer, so I'm gonna make it like a warm light over here. There we go. So right click, black mask, and this is gonna be a generator, and we're gonna use, of course, our metal edgeware, which is gonna hit the edges. Now here, I do want to increase the intensity of the metal edgeware. I want to decrease the grunge because I don't want to have as much effect on the on the inside of the things. And of course, we're going to use the same slope thing. So we're going to go to our filters and we're going to use again our blur slope. And look at that. We get this very nice effect again. Make it a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner. And I like to have this as linear dodge so that it like really crunches the color, as you can see there. And of course, lower the intensity a little bit. So now, again, as you can see, we're getting some light on the high points of the character without there actually being light. Again, let's jump here onto the C view. You're gonna see how we get even more like definition on the elements without actually like painting anything on the guy. So this makes it look really cool, and you can play around with the settings on the blur slope, and you're gonna get even better results. Now let's add a little bit more contrast, because right now if I press C, we lose all of the details, right? So we definitely want to have the details on the color map as well to really like push them in. So I'm going to add one more layer. This is going to be called details. And I'm going to, again, turn everything off except for the color. So on the color, I'm going to select this beige again. But let's go darker, like really dark. In this case, we're going to go really dark. We're going to add a black mask, but in this case, we're going to add a fill layer. And on the fill layer, we're going to look for the curvature map. Or sorry, for the curvature map, which tells me where the curvatures of the object are. So all of the crevices. And you can go here, right click, add a levels, and play around with the levels to change the intensity of the curvature map. So if we want to really like punch in the elements, there we go. We're actually going to invert, there we go. That's more like what we're looking for. And we can move this thing a little bit to really bring in all of the crevices, right? That's what we want to see, like that thing right there. Of course, this is way too much, but we can change this to like an overlay. We can lower this intensity quite a bit, and we can also add on top of all of this another filter. And again, the blur slope. This one, in this case, I think I am gonna make it like really small, because I don't want to break it as much. And let's play around again with the intensity. Because again, the only thing I want with this is to get a little bit more detail on like the hand painted effect, which is this one right here. Look at that. Super cool. Which, of course, you can replicate this by hand, but I mean, if we have this sort of options, why not use them, right? So that's it. That is the main layers of our construction. And as I've mentioned before, you can go crazy. You can add more stuff, more elements, more different like approaches. Now let's go for the main lights, okay? So for the main lights, I am gonna add 2 layers. First, I'm gonna add the main shadow layer. In the main shadow, I'm actually gonna use if we're using a warm light, I'm gonna use like a dark shadow, something like this, like a purple or something. Let's add a black mask. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a fill layer, or a generator, sorry, and we're gonna use the light generator. And the light is pretty much like if you had like a spotlight or like a lantern, and you're pointing it towards your object, so you can move the direction. In this case, I'm gonna point it so that it's facing from the bottom, as you can see right there. We can change the highlight glossiness, which is kind of like the intensity. So I'm gonna intensify a little bit more there on the bottom side, and see how nice and dark we get this. Look at this. This is a flat color. I'm pressing C to jump into the channels. So yeah, you can see that the channel right here looking quite nice. You can of course change this to like an overlay if you wanna like darken it with the colors that we already have, which looks quite nice. And we're gonna do the exact same thing, but with the light. So I'm gonna again turn everything off. This is gonna be like a nice bright light. This is probably gonna be like a highest light. This is why we had some room there on our elements. I'm gonna add a black mask. I'm gonna add a generator. This is gonna be a light generator, and this one's gonna be pointing from the top like this. See? And there we go. Now, of course, I normally like to have this as a linear dodge, and we can decrease the intensity a little bit, and we can play around with the highlight glossiness. Depending on how we want this thing to look, we can play with the highlight level. There's a lot of things we can do. You can press again your letter C and go into your color channel. And look at this. This is how this thing looks without any light information. Doesn't look quite nice because we're having like lights and shadows everywhere. That's exactly what we're going for. So for instance here, I really like this effect, but I do think that we're getting some light where I don't want it to. So I'm gonna add a black mask or a paint layer on the mask stack. And then with my brushes, I'm gonna go for like a soft brush. And I'm definitely gonna like delete this thing right here on the eyes. So I definitely want the eyes to be like really dark, and maybe like remove some of the glossiness from the top part right here. There we go. And that's it. Now you can also, of course, after doing that, we can go here and add another filter and use the nice little blur slope. And now even the lights are gonna have this sort of like fragmented effect. So now we're gonna have this sort of like stylized hand-painted texture without having to actually hand paint. So what was it? 17 minutes, 15 minutes, because we did UVs. In 15-20 minutes, we were able to recreate this very nice effect, this very nice element, without having to worry too much about it. Now, let's say you want to add a little bit of more like visual interest, right? Because right now the colors are looking nice, but they're looking a little bit flat. Remember that every single material that we have here inside of Substance allows you to multiply things or move things around. So for instance, we can go for like the concrete bear, which I really like because it has a lot of visual interest, turn everything off so that we're only seeing the color, and then use the color like in an overlay. Like get it like really soft, and that's pretty much like adding a texture to the whole thing, right? Like maybe like 15 on values. And there we go. So that just adds a little bit of extra things here and there, and it's gonna make it look even better. I am seeing this thing right here, which I don't love. Where's that coming from? Let's take a look. There has to be some sort of that's really weird. There seems to be something or some layer that's giving us that weird like black thing. Let's start turning things off. This one, it's the shadows. Okay, so let's turn everything back on. And if we go to the shadows and if we go to the dirt, the only thing we probably need to do is change this triplanar. So I'm gonna set this to true. Oh, it seems to be one of them. Huh. Okay, I mean, no problem. We can just go here, add a paint layer, and just smooth it out. I'm not sure if everyone's contributing to that one. It's kind of weird. Could be. Could be. In that case, I mean, again, we can try just add like a paint layer everywhere and see where that thing is. It's very weird. I don't think it's like a UV thing, to be honest. I mean, the concrete we can also change to triplanar mapping. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. Now, one thing we could do though, and it's going to be super easy, is we can fix that in Photoshop. So let me show you. I am going to first export these textures. And in this case, we're actually only going to be using, because this is supposed to be like a flat game, we're only going to be using color and normal to get some of the details and to get the element. And that's why this method is so good, because if you're going to do a game or a production where you want to keep things optimized, you want your render times to be really low and you don't want to be calculating that roughness and specularity and stuff like that, having flat surfaces and flat like stylized effect is really, really nice. So let's go here to the stylized skull. That's the folder. And I'm just going to export like this. Let's export JPEG. That's fine. And let's just export. So if we see the directory here, again, we don't need the height. We don't need the metallic. The ambient occlusion, we might need it if we want to like give more shadows to the whole thing. Not this one. And that's the GL. Look at this. Look at this beautiful texture. Like this is what you would traditionally paint inside of Photoshop, which is really, really complicated to do. So that's why being able to do it this way helps us so much. So now let me bring this into Photoshop. Open Photoshop. That's our nice cover element. There we go. And let's look for that. There we go. So it's this section right here. So I'm just going to use my clone tool and just like patch that thing up over there, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, it's some sort of like, it's probably like some cross contamination from this piece or something, but yeah, let's just save that one right there, and there we go. Now we go back to Maya. So like this guy, assign a new material. Let's assign a Lambert material because we don't need any lighting information. On the file, we're gonna plug in the color node. So base color, there we go. And then, of course, the normal map, which is also going to be really important. So in the bump mapping, we're going to have this as a tangent space normal. And on the file, we're going to set this up with our normal map. There we go. Very important, normal map should be set up to raw. So utility raw, so that they shade properly. And this is what we have. And I even have a light set up here. You can see it right here. Let me add a little bit more ambient light because it's a little bit too dark. And this is how we would see, like if we're doing a game, this is just two lights, just like a directional light and an ambient light. And this already looks pretty good. So yeah, this is it, guys. This is the end of the lesson of the tutorial for this part for today. Tomorrow we're gonna do an animation with this guy, so I'm gonna show you a very quick rig that we can do, just a very simple rig to be able to like move this thing around and imagine this thing is just like floating in like a Castlevania game or something. So we're gonna do a quick rig and we're gonna do a quick animation, probably like an idle animation and then tack animation real quick. So yeah, that's it. If you like the series, if you like this content, make sure to leave a comment, make sure to share it and subscribe. That's always helpful for us, as you guys know. Stay tuned for more information, and I'll see you back tomorrow. Bye bye.